People flinch when I say it. My children put me in a nursing home. I was 75, all my faculties. One fall in the kitchen and suddenly I wasn't a person anymore. I was a problem that needed placing. They didn't ask me. They presented it. Dad, we found a place. Dad, we think this is best. And underneath all of it, the sentence nobody said out loud. You've become a problem we don't know how to solve. So we all agreed to call it care. I lasted 14 months. Then I got on a plane to the Philippines. Right now there's a ceiling fan turning overhead and garlic and rice coming through the window, and an old man 2 streets over waiting to beat me at dominoes. Let me tell you what happened in between.
My name is Joe. I spent 34 years as a high school history teacher in Central Ohio. Not a glamorous life by any measurement most people would apply to a life. I drove the same 15-minute route to the same school for 3 decades. I coached JV baseball for 11 years until my shoulder gave out. I knew every diner in a 40-mile radius that served a decent breakfast, and I had opinions about all of them. I was the kind of man who existed completely inside one place, and was, for most of his life, perfectly content about it. My wife Eleanor died 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end, which is one of those timelines that is somehow both too fast and not fast enough. We had been married 41 years. We had 3 children, Martin in Columbus, Susan in Charlotte, and the youngest, Beth, in Seattle, which is far enough away that the distance became, over the years, a convenient excuse for both of us about things that had nothing to do with geography. Eleanor was the one who knew how to keep everyone in orbit. She made the calls and remembered the birthdays, and smoothed the surfaces, and created the conditions under which we all still felt like a family, even as we scattered into our separate adult lives. When she went, the gravity went with her. We tried. Martin called more. Susan visited at Thanksgiving. Beth and I had long phone calls that both of us meant to have more of. But the thing Eleanor built, the actual connective tissue of it, that was hers and it left with her. I managed alone for 3 years. I want to be clear about that, because the story gets told sometimes as if the moment Eleanor died I became helpless, and that is not what happened. I cooked for myself. I maintained the house. I drove to the grocery store, and the doctor and the hardware store, and the diner on Route 40, where Linda the waitress had been bringing me decaf without being asked since 2019. I read. I went to church. I had a neighbor named Grady who came over Thursday evenings and we watched whatever game was on and argued about it with the specific, comfortable pointlessness of 2 men who have run out of things to prove to each other. The fall happened on a Tuesday in November. Ice on the back step that I'd meant to salt and hadn't gotten to. Left hip. Not broken. The X-ray was clear but badly bruised in ways that took 6 weeks to stop reminding me about. And something shifted after that fall. Not in my body, which healed. In my children. The fall gave them a story to tell each other. A concrete thing to point to. A piece of evidence. I understand it now better than I did then. Fear is a powerful rewriter of situations. They were frightened. Martin was the one who organized the conversation. Because Martin organizes things, that is who Martin is. He could not help it any more than I could help being who I am. And over a Sunday lunch at his house in Columbus, where Susan had driven up and Beth had joined by phone, they told me about the place they'd found. Meadow Glen, which is the kind of name designed to sound like something it isn't. There is no meadow. There is a parking lot and some ornamental shrubs and a lobby that smells of industrial cleaning product under a thin layer of something floral that is supposed to make you not notice the industrial cleaning product. The cost was $4,800 a month. I had my teacher's pension. I had Social Security. Together they came to $2,300 a month. The gap was supposed to be covered by drawing down my savings, the money Eleanor and I had put away slowly and carefully over 40 years of living on teacher salaries, which is to say, not a fortune but something, a cushion, a dignity reserve. At the rate Meadow Glen required, the math said my savings would be gone in 4 years, and after the savings were gone, Medicaid would cover it. But Medicaid in Ohio, and what Medicaid will and will not cover, is a sentence that contains more asterisks than words, and I will not pretend to fully understand it. What I understood was this. I had spent 40 years building something, and I was being asked to spend it, all of it, on a room I hadn't chosen in a place I didn't want to be, at a rate that had been set by people who understood that families in fear will agree to almost anything if you frame it as care. The room at Meadow Glen was on the 2nd floor. It had a window that faced the parking lot. There was a television and a recliner and a bed with rails. There were activities scheduled on a laminated sheet on the door. Bingo on Monday, chair yoga on Wednesday, movie afternoon on Friday, which meant a film from several years ago, projected in a common room, where some residents were watching and some were not watching, and the distinction between the two states was, on certain afternoons, not entirely clear. The staff were mostly kind. I want to say that because it would be unfair not to. The nurses were professional. The aides worked hard for wages that should have shamed the ownership group. I had no complaint about the people. My complaint was architectural. My complaint was structural. My complaint was that I was 75 years old, in possession of my mind, capable of conversation and opinion and humor, and the system I had been placed inside was not designed for a person. It was designed for a category. The category was aging parent, liability managed, children reassured. I was not a person in that place. I was a room number and a medication schedule, and a name on a door. Grady came to visit on the 3rd Thursday. He brought a thermos of the coffee I actually liked, because the coffee at Meadow Glen was the kind of coffee that raised serious questions about the facility's commitment to basic human dignity. He sat in the recliner and I sat on the bed and we talked and it was fine. It was Grady. But underneath it I could see him looking at the room, the rails on the bed, the laminated activity sheet, and I could see him thinking the thing he was too kind to say and I was too proud to acknowledge. He came back twice more before the visits tapered off. Not because he stopped caring, because there is something about a place like that which is difficult to enter voluntarily and repeatedly when you have a choice. The people inside don't have a choice. The people outside do. And the people outside, even the good ones, even the ones who love you, will find, quietly, without quite deciding to, that their visits become less frequent. Not abandonment, just the slow gravity of a life that is still moving, pulling people away from a life that has been stilled. My daughter Beth called every Sunday. Martin came on the 2nd Saturday of every month, reliable as a bill. Susan sent cards, actual paper cards, which I appreciated more than she knew. They had handled the situation. They were checking on the handled situation. And I sat in that room with the parking lot window and felt, with a clarity that sharpened rather than dulled over those 14 months, that I was being waited for. Not for anything specific, just in the way that people in those places are waited for, patiently, by everyone, including time itself. The idea came from a magazine, of all things. Not even a real magazine, one of those that get passed around the common room at Meadow Glen, Soft Corners, 2 years out of date, a travel supplement someone had left behind. There was a piece in it about retirees living abroad. The Philippines, Thailand, Portugal. Photographs of older people on porches with mountains behind them, cups of something in their hands, expressions on their faces that did not look like people being waited for. I read it 3 times over 2 days. Then I got on the Wi-Fi they provided, and I started doing what I used to do in Eleanor's last months, when I couldn't sleep. I started reading. Every forum, every blog, every first-person account I could find of an older American who had gone somewhere and stayed. And what I found, under all the different countries and all the different stories, was a pattern. The pattern was, I was invisible, and then I was not. The pattern was, I had stopped being a person to my circumstances, and then I moved, and my circumstances began treating me like one again. I want to tell you about the conversation with Martin. I called him on a Tuesday, which was not his day, which is how he knew immediately that something was happening. I told him I had been researching. I told him about the Philippines. I told him I intended to go, that I wanted to try it for 6 months as an experiment, that I needed him to be honest with me about whether the barrier was truly concern for my safety, or whether it was the thing underneath that, the harder thing, the worry about what people would say, what it would look like, whether it would read as the family that couldn't manage its old father. There was a long pause. He said, "Dad, you're 75. I said, "Martin, I'm aware." He said, "It's not safe." I said, "The second-floor room at Meadow Glen with the parking lot view is not safe either. It is just safe-looking, and those are not the same thing, and I think you know that." Another pause. Longer. He said he'd talked to Susan and Beth. I said I was not asking for a vote. I was asking for his support, or his honest objection. And I needed to know which one I was getting, so I could plan accordingly. He gave me his support. It cost him something to do it, and I have not forgotten that. I landed in Cebu City on a Thursday morning in March, 13 months ago. I will tell you the truth about arriving. It was terrifying in the specific way that doing a brave thing always is, which is to say the terror is real, and the bravery is not the absence of it, but the decision to move anyway. The airport was noise and heat and motion, and I stood for a moment outside the arrival's door with my 2 bags and my bad knees and my 76-year-old body, and I thought, "Joe, you have either done the most alive thing you have done in years, or you have lost your mind entirely, and at this particular moment, you cannot tell which." A man named Romy was holding a sign with my name. He ran a guest house in a neighborhood called La Hug that a forum contact had recommended. Romy was perhaps 50, with the build of a man who had done physical work his whole life, and the face of a man who found most situations more amusing than alarming. He took my larger bag without ceremony and said, "First time in Cebu, sir?" And when I said yes, he said, "Good. First time is the best time. After that, you know too much." And he laughed at his own joke, all the way to the van. The guest house was on a street busy enough to have everything, and quiet enough to sleep. My room was clean and simple, and had a window overlooking a narrow garden where something was always blooming in colors that Ohio had not prepared me for. Romy's wife, a small decisive woman named Sita, brought me a plate of something without asking if I wanted it, arroz caldo, a rice porridge with ginger and garlic and a boiled egg on top, and sat across from me while I ate it, with the frank supervisory attention of a woman who has fed tired travelers for 20 years and knows when one needs watching. I ate all of it. She looked satisfied. She said, "You are too thin for an American," and took the plate. I slept 11 hours. I woke up and the garden was loud with birds I could not name, and the street outside was already going, and the smell coming through the window was garlic and exhaust, and something sweet and green. I spent the first 3 days trying to identify, before Romy told me it was the ylang ylang tree in the neighbor's yard, which blooms constantly, and which I now consider one of the finest smells on earth. I want to be straight about the first weeks. I won't give you the cleaned-up version. The heat took real adjustment. I am not young. My body does not thermoregulate the way it once did. The first week I could manage maybe 3 hours outside before I needed to retreat. The streets were loud in ways my ears had not been asked to process in years. The traffic operates on principles I still do not fully understand, but have learned to navigate the way you navigate a river, not by fighting the current, but by finding where the current is going and going with it. I got lost on the 4th day, in a way that would have been a minor inconvenience 40 years ago, and was, at 76 with bad knees in unfamiliar heat, genuinely frightening. I had walked further than I intended, and my phone had given up on the maps, and I was on a street I did not recognize, with no clear idea which direction contained Romy's guest house. I stood there, sweating, beginning to feel the particular cold panic that the body produces when it understands it is in trouble. A woman appeared from a shop doorway, not a young woman, 60-something, a shopkeeper by the look of her, with the direct, unflappable calm of someone who has seen every variety of confused foreigner on this street. She said, "You are lost, sir." Not unkindly, just accurately. And when I said yes, she did not give me directions. She locked her shop, put the key in her pocket, and walked me back to Romy's guest house herself. 20 minutes, her pace matched to mine, which was not fast, without complaint, without any indication that she had somewhere else to be. I tried to thank her at the gate. She waved it off the way you wave off a small and obvious thing. She said, "You are a visitor. It is correct to help," and went back to her shop. I stood at Romy's gate for a moment after she left and thought about a thing I had not thought about in 14 months. I thought about what it felt like to be treated as a person whose situation warranted a response. Not a category, not a room number. A person, standing on a street, needing something, and someone deciding that the need was sufficient reason to act. It sounds simple. It should be simple. It used to feel simple.